Hey guys, it's Mark, and join with me today will be Daniel. In this podcast, we're going to cover the topic of what sort of advice you would provide your younger self and how different things play a different part. So, this includes your mindset, your environment, your character, and your relationship.
What I've kind of done is like, what is one of the the first five things, or that I would start teaching a person to get them to say where we are now, or where I was at 19 or 21 or 23, and where I want to be at 25. Like, what are the steps that you need to and pieces of knowledge you need to understand to actually get to those places? And they're kind of like, they're all like barriers of entry, if that makes sense. Like, you
Yeah,
need to know these to actually start progressing, because if you don't know them.
yeah. You know what? This will. I think that's a really good approach. I think as a fun exercise, let's paint a picture for the people watching it and for the audience. What were you doing at 17, 18, and I'll sort of do the same thing, and then they'll give context, and then we can go into like we can explore some of the topics a bit more. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that sounds sick.
Yeah,
I'm really lucky. So
yeah,
17 and 18 is like not as young for me, because I met Dylan around that age.
yeah,
So Dylan was my mentor, still was my mentor, and he, kind of taught me these things,
yeah.
allowed me to kind of have a different view of what the world actually is.
For the benefit of the listeners, tell them who's Dylan. And
Oh,
yeah,
so Dylan, well, where I met Dylan, met Dylan at Nando's. That's when I was, 16, 17, 18, around
yeah,
there. We started progressing into some more investing and trading kind of sectors, while also building my self-development
yeah,
kind of journey. And now we're all in, there's obviously hundreds of things in the middle, but kind
yeah,
of catching up to where we are now. We're all at home. We're really, really lucky to, be to be investing and, trading on the stock market full time.
yeah,
So we don't have to have those regular jobs anymore. And we're still, essentially, our main goal is to financially educate a lot of the world, and, you know, essentially reverse engineer that, be the person you needed when you were younger, and kind of help many of those people coming through that age group, and help
yeah,
them realize financial freedom.
yeah,
Um, and he's kind of well, we like to say he's the brains of the operation around here.
yeah. 100%,
So like,
hundred percent.
he's yeah, big inspiration for all of us, I reckon.
Yeah, I think like you were saying that you guys were working at Nando's, and at the time, you sort of just you straight away struck you as like a really interesting character, someone who was a couple years older than you, had already started the journey in finances. What was it like your priorities at the time? Like what were your loose goals, or what were you what took a lot of your attention in terms of what do I want at that time?
Even back then, like, loose goals were like such a taboo topic. It's like, oh, you create
Yeah.
goals?
Why do you
I
have
mean,
goals? You should just
yeah,
be partying and thinking about
yeah, it's just
drinks and
partying and shit like
girls.
that. But I guess, I come from like middle class, if that makes sense. So not
Yeah.
crazy poor. I had, just enough, without having too much, if that makes sense. And I kind of
Yeah.
realized that I wanted a hell of a lot more than that in the world.
Yeah.
Um, Purely for just reasons that I did want more. There's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with wanting the nicer things in life, and that's developed into also wanting to help other people get that. But
Yeah.
that's pretty much where I was. There was no real vision. There was no real idea. There was just, Jesus, I want more than this.
Yeah.
And someone as in Dylan was kind of preaching, well, I mean, it's actually possible. You got
Yeah.
to go down this journey, though. This is the most probabilistic, successful way of doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and dude's quirky, bro. One
So,
of the things that actually drew me to him, is that he just knows a little bit about everything.
yeah. Yeah.
And for when I was younger, like 15 and whatnot, I would
Mm.
do that, but like egotistically.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I know a little bit of everything. I know everything. But, you know, obviously that's not actually true.
Yeah.
Until you actually start doing the knowledge, and then, it works out to actually understand a fair bit.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, interesting, man.
Well, I know Dylan from Nando's. How do you know him?
That's good questions. I I think the first time I seen Dylan was actually through the series that you guys made through YouTube, believe it or not. So you guys,
Really?
yeah, so you guys kind of told the origin stories of like, how, um, I think it was mostly sort of focused on Dylan and how he started,
Yeah.
Hardcore Headstart, and
Yeah.
it showed kind of you guys were at the old house and he was working long hours and like working at Nando's and like sort of building the stuff on the side allowed him to invest in kind of like the mindset stuff.
Mm.
And then from there, I was just like, "Fuck, these guys sound like they're going through like a similar thing to myself."
Mm.
But then I was like, "Fuck, are these guys? They're obviously Australians, but are they from like Melbourne?" And then I heard like the Springvale, or something kind of hinted that you guys were kind of somewhat local, right?
Yeah.
And then I reached out to Dylan and I think some like Samir as well, and like you guys sort of just mentioned you were like you were keen to catch up, and that was kind of like interesting because imagine you reached out to someone who was like an influencer or something on YouTube, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
like you guys hadn't gone that big, but they were like the first. Usually, there's a bit of back and forth. Oh, yeah, how you going? Like, oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
great that you're also doing a channel. But imagine they go, hey, we should catch up this month at the dojo.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that kind of goes from like casual to like, oh fuck, like this guy wants to meet in person.
Yeah.
Um, so then like that was the thing that striked me, and then we had like sort of similar interests. I was getting into crypto and investing in Bitcoin and that sort of stuff at that time. Um, and then kind of loosely we said let's catch up, but like because I found out logistically you guys were on the other side, over the bridge like more than an hour away. I was like, this is probably not gonna happen.
Yeah.
um, I stopped talking to you guys for a while, and then
Yeah.
um, I thought of Dylan again because I saw one of his posts around eToro, and I was getting into investing on that platform, and I thought, hey, maybe I'll offer to use his affiliate link,
Yeah.
and then that started the conversation again, and that's um, how I
It's
decided.
crazy.
But this is, mind you, this was 3 years apart, so maybe I'd matured and gone, fuck it, I'm gonna make the effort to meet people, even if
Yeah.
it's kind of like it takes more effort on my end.
Dude, but we've only been mates since like the start of the year.
Yeah, yeah, it's been
The start of the year, like properly.
yeah, literally like 6 months. Feels a lot longer, yeah.
Like that's I don't give people credit a lot, but like
Yeah,
you're like the kind of person you are. It it's simply why like you just fit in here so well because we're all the same.
yeah,
Like you just resonate with us, and like what month is it? Dude, I don't even know. Christ,
yeah,
June. 6 months or something. I've
yeah,
known you for 6 months, and like your family immediately. That doesn't happen often with a lot of people. I
yeah,
don't feel. Or I feel like it's based on some fundamental lie. It's like, oh,
yeah,
I like this person, or someone introduced me, blah blah blah. It's like
yeah,
effort was put in to actually make this interaction. It was 3 years of kind of hello and then in distant communication, and
mm,
now 3 years later, you're at our house every single weekend.
yeah, yeah. The first 2 months, I was like, I'm not sure what I'm doing, but I like hanging out with these guys.
I don't know.
Because
It's just fun, man, isn't
yeah,
it?
I
I
mean, like
find it just
to put things into context, like it was like an hour drive, like going to see you guys every weekend, and then an hour drive back. But like, I think straight away you guys recognized that, so you made me sort of feel comfortable, and like, you guys just did really hospitable like things, like sort of, and it made me want to sort of keep hanging out and spending time with you guys. So
yeah.
yeah,
Now we try to think of that emotional intelligence side of thing. A lot of people don't. Some people just don't have it.
yeah,
But we try and put ourselves in the other person's shoes, and driving an hour away, costing petrol, costing that amount of time.
yeah,
Your time is important, your capital is important, which means
mm,
it's important to you, which means it's important to us, and something we need to think of. So
yeah,
like
yeah,
we
definitely.
try and
I think that segues really well into like something that I want to sort of go deep into later, but just it got me thinking. One of the things, like to paint the picture for me when I was 18, right? The things that was going through my head was like, I need to especially like with Facebook coming out and like all the sort of these big tech companies coming out, and being in the Western world, you got this entrepreneur idea of entrepreneurship and being a self-made person started that kind of concept started becoming popular in 2008, which is when I turned 18, just to put things in perspective, right? And I being sort of very what's the word, like when someone has like influence over you when you're young, like impressionable, sorry. Yeah, so
Yeah.
when you're 18, you're very impressionable, so these loose concepts become like fixated in your mind. And I had an unhealthy attachment to this idea that I had to be great. I had to be, in order to have self-worth, I needed to be respected. I needed to be someone who created, being that 1% and be like better than everyone kind of thing. And that was a really unhealthy place to be. And like a lot of like, 18-year-olds, you blame sort of your environment when you don't feel kind of like you've achieved what you've got. So like I started blaming it on like, if I was unhappy, and then I got this, it moved on to this unhealthy feelings of being, like chasing happiness. Like I'm not happy, therefore it's the people around me, or therefore it's something going on, right? So I'd blame my close friends, I'd blame my, my partner at the time, I'd blame, whoever I could, and not like directly, but I was just like, I don't think it's you, but being around you hasn't helped. Maybe I'll try this. And I kept like hopping around and like trying to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that kind of made me realize that as soon as you kind of find people that are, like positive people that feel like family, you stop having those kind of feelings, like those negative sort of feelings. Yeah.
One of the things on my list is literally that. That's
Really?
hilarious. Yeah, it's environment, and I think people, like you've articulated that perfectly. But people hear the quote a lot. You're the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most, or that kind of show me your friends, I'll show you your future, or that kind of crap, right?
That cliche,
But
yeah.
yeah, all that cliche crap. But
Yeah.
the underlying factor there is environment is important.
Yeah.
The environment you kind of surround yourself with
Yeah.
can seriously impact, your mental diet. It can impact, how you feel, as you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, dude, if you find people who, are trying to move in similar directions with the correct amount of like health attached to it, like they're not going disgustingly unhealthily with negative energy, and it's all like, I'm number one and no one else is going to exist.
Yeah.
And like, I think maybe what you're trying to touch on as well is like community as well, right?
Yeah, 100%.
It's like having that community there of, like-minded people, which is something we're trying to do, and something together is, yes, it's unfathomably important.
So
That's a big word, but it's crazy.
Let's elaborate on that a bit more. So like what was the point that you had there? So it was around environment, or was it around community? So what was the like, I guess, the piece of advice?
So I use kind of like that quote of you're the average of 5 people you're around, but I don't associate with just the people. I associate with the actual larger environment.
Yeah.
If you're putting yourself in precarious situations, or situations that don't match the person you think you are now, or the person you want to be in 5 to 10 years, then simply you're not going to become that person in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And for a long time there, when I was 17, 18, even 19, even up until a couple of years ago, I would have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And then slowly that foot in grew larger, and it grew to 2 feet, grew to 2 feet, So you can't have both.
Yeah.
Which is the unfortunate way of the world. You can't have, negative kind of environment around you where you're going out and doing all that kind of partying, and then also sacrificing and growing at the same time.
Yeah, 100%.
The things, it kind of just doesn't, balance wise, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And I think just adding to that, like when you're kind of like a little bit younger, 17 or 18, you've got responsibilities of school and you might have a part-time job, but you still have a lot of time to choose how you spend your time with people, and you kind of
Yeah.
just go with the flow. And in contrast, as you get older, you have more responsibilities and you actually find that you have less time, so you have to choose where you spend your time more carefully, and that's where it becomes more important. Hey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, meeting Dylan and Dylan kind of, progress and accelerate my progress, if that makes sense. I can't say
Yeah.
I'd be here today without, but, you know, using and understanding those lessons that you have to really, really apply oneself, and environment is that important. I think it's probably one of the reasons like we're doing this podcast and actually having communications, or having like doing any kind of, content on these topics, is because I went through that, and I find it so important to really help people who are going through that right now, because there's some people who are trying to progress and they're also trying to do both. Like I know that feeling of, all right, I want to go hang out with these friends because I like them, I go and have a really, really good time, but I want to be a, self-sufficient, financially free, wisdom. I mean, guru is a terrible word, but want to be guru is a shit word.
Yeah.
But I want to be as intelligent as I possibly can be, so that I can help as many people eventually.
Yeah.
The things just don't match. You know what I mean?
I guess like maybe like another way said is you want to have like the knowledge when people come to you with the questions, and you like have those answers, like
Yeah.
around the specifically around like finances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When because I think, unfortunately, it kind of, it's like a domino effect. When you're 17, 18, you kind of start down that road, and then you kind of continue down that road, continue down that road, continue down that road, and then you top, unfortunate personal finances on top of it, where then you've got HEX debt, you've got, mortgages, you've got getting married, and, kids at a young age, all those kind of things. And you kind of get stuck.
Yeah.
Like you simply just get stuck. And, and the way out is, considerably harder when you've got all those responsibilities.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of, I guess, prioritize and be I speak a lot about having one foot in one side and one foot in the other for a few years there, where I could have, if I applied oneself, progress a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And quite simply wanting to, what's that Miley Cyrus song?
The John Wrecking Ball.
What is it? Not Wrecking Ball. Dude, fuck. That was gonna be fucking bang on. What is this shit?
I'm the worst one to ask about Miley Cyrus, mate.
I don't know Miley Cyrus. I don't even know why I brought that up. I don't even know the song. What's wrong with me?
How about this? Yeah. Why don't you ask me a question, and then we'll just pretend like we're continuing the podcast.
Fantastic idea.
like this never, like the cutout never happened.
Like a cutout just never happened.
Yeah.
Just move the fuck on.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So I guess one thing I wanted to kind of bring up, that I think is wildly important, is standards.
Yeah.
So, there's a really, really good example of Andy Jassy, the now CEO of Amazon, shadowing Jeff Bezos. Yeah. And him finding, Andy Jassy always thought that he had very, very, very high standards. He is the, founder, or he's the CEO, or he was the CEO. He was running AWS, Amazon Web Services, which is, the money maker for Amazon. Yeah. And he was running that. He actually created that as well. And then he started shadowing Jeff Bezos. And he says in an interview that Jeff Bezos' standards are so much higher than Andy Jassy could believe, that it was just like uncomprehendable. Like he was like blown away with how high he had his standards, that even, the person running AWS, arguably one of the most, profitable things in the world, didn't have a standards as high. So I've tried to mirror something similar for myself. And, Obviously I don't have the same standards as Jeff Bezos because she,
We'll forgive
my
you for
dog.
that.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it very much. But it's in the small details and everything I do, I try and continue to progress my standards and make sure I'm increasing my standards.
Yeah.
And at a young age, I think for me, my standards were just, if I kicked a goal, I was like, I'm the greatest of all time. Simple. I was like, that's it. Don't care.
Yeah.
I'm the greatest. So I'm interested how your standards have evolved over time.
Yeah, I think like it's interesting you say that because it seems like um, while maybe a little bit misplaced, you had like a reasonably good self esteem, like sort of like this
Mm.
sense of like, hey, just kick the goal, I'm the fucking best, yeah, like
Yeah. Like absolutely no fucking like it's just fundamentally built
yeah.
on nothing.
I think I was a little bit like the opposite, so I kind of I was probably more of like a quiet achiever. So when I did achieve things, I'd be quietly confident, but often I'd kind of dwarf my own um, like achievements rather than like kind of see. Because I had this kind of idea that you had to be humble, but there's a difference between being humble and like almost like deprecation, almost like putting yourself down to make other people feel better about themselves, or like that sort of thing. You going too far. um, I think self esteem was a big issue for me, like throughout my 20s, and it's probably something that I've gotten more comfortable with, probably only in the last like maybe 3 or 4 years. I've been able to sort of it's more of like an internal battle than it is like something that maybe like people might pick up on straight away. People kind of just read it as he's a little bit shy. Um,
Hmm.
but I think yeah, big um, one of the things I've got down here is um, around friendship. So building on the idea of like choosing your right tribe and like building like choosing and finding meaning in friendships, that kind of leads to a stronger sense of self esteem. Whereas like if you're sort of around the wrong kind of people, or you don't have a circle that is good at expressing love, right, and like affirming achievements, then you can kind of have a bit of you're stuck with your own thoughts, or maybe you got like just people, maybe not, like I had friends, they never directly said I was bad at anything, so that wasn't the cause of my self-esteem issues, but it was more they would complain about other people and talk about how crap like other people were outside of our circle, and that was enough to kind of get me thinking like maybe I'm
Right.
crap at certain things, right, and like just being in that
Right. Right.
environment. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's not even direct, like, hey, why? It was more like what, like look at this guy trying to do that. He's not achieving anything. Why does he even bother? Kind of thing. So like someone who's trying to set out to run their own business, or kind of run a podcast or whatever, right? It wasn't directly like aimed at me, but that kind of gave me a sense of maybe where I'm placing my focus is kind of misguided. Um,
Right.
and like in contrast to how I feel now, it's like I'd say 90% of the time I feel loved, and 90% of the time I feel like I'm in an environment where I don't even have to try to kind of have positive thoughts. So
Mm.
I don't know if that's just growth or if it's environment, but I honestly think it's when you spend the most time with people who are just positive and sort of there to encourage you, you only have those thoughts, and you don't have to try to have those thoughts. And
Mm.
like instead I was hanging around people who had kind of not much positive to say around people around them. So I was constantly trying things like meditation, and I was looking for ways to kind of quiet my mind, and it's just like,
Mm.
no, you don't have to spend hours meditating. You just need to find a group of people that are positive and like good, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
yeah.
So did self-esteem kind of affect the way you built standards or the standards you created for yourself? Because you thought, well, a person of my lack of self-esteem and a person like what I believe I can do, my standards can't be that high because quite simply it's not achievable.
Yeah, I think I set the stand in terms of like starting to say no to things, right? So like,
Mm.
um, I'm going to focus on, um, I'm going to focus on, for example, not spending a lot of money at restaurants where, like, let's say if a friend was going to spend $100 in a restaurant, I'd be more open, and I started getting into those conversations of, like, I'm trying to save money, so I don't want to spend that much. I want to hang out with you, but I don't want to spend that much. And then I started getting better at like, maybe cutting out the really toxic people in my life. But then there were still people that were like I'd been friends for a long time, and I wasn't sure how to kind of manage that. And my sort of younger self had this kind of like, it was all or nothing. Like, you have to cut people out. Anything that's bad, you just gotta cut, right? But then
Yeah.
I kind of realized that you know people don't have to have the exact same goals as you for you to kind of be around them, but you might want to limit how much time you see them. So like, if you've got someone who's really insecure and they're always complaining about how bad the environment is, but they're still your friend or your brother or your family even, right? Doesn't mean you cut them out, but you might see them less frequently, because then they start sucking your energy and your positivity, and you know they make you more like them. Yeah. So
I've definitely done some of that limiting stuff, I can guarantee.
yeah, and
So,
it's not all or
uh,
nothing. I find limiting kind of, it resolves a lot of
yeah,
those. Yeah.
I think that the mistakes I made with limiting were trying to maybe preach or kind of send the same messages, but in those environments, in those limited environments.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, we are a big proponent of investing. We think it's, the key to, it's really, really important for your finances. In those environments, when I'm limiting the amount I would see them, I would then push, hey, make sure you're investing. Hey, this is how you get invested. Hey, what do you think about this investing principle? And simply just not the correct environment to be pushing anything like that. It doesn't simply doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I kind of really, really limited and restricted and intentionally pulled back on all of those relationships that it was like, oh, okay, this guy's actually different.
Yeah.
He just doesn't see us once a month. Like he's actually different. That's why.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, in the business that we are as well, like of, education and um, being, as per se, experts in our field,
Mm.
it's important to kind of send a message. And like an environment like this is obviously educational and like informational. It's correct environment to be able to send a message.
Yeah.
There are like being in the back of a pub at 10 p.m. at night saying, hey, please invest. People can't see you're a different person. How the hell would you know to invest when you're sitting right next to them doing the same damn thing? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I think maybe tying like that environment thing off as well. Like
Yeah.
that's how I see environment. Environment's everything.
I think what you said is pretty interesting. The thing that came to my mind, when you talked about being in the environment of like education um, and sort of like having the right people around you, I had like ideas sometimes where I'd kind of just throw them out, like, hey, I'd say to maybe the wrong people, let's I'd go up to let's go up to one of my friends and be like, hey, I think we could make some money building websites, like really basic websites, and sell them for like $200 a pop. But I'd say it
Yeah.
to someone who'd just shut down that idea and be like, yeah, I guess like it sounds like a good idea, but like, it's gonna be a bit hard.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna work. The number one thing I'd always get was, there's so many websites out there. Why should we do websites? There's so many podcasts out there. Why should we do podcasts? There's so many YouTube channels out there. What do you
Yeah.
think is going to make your one big? Compare that to
Mm.
being in an environment like the community that we have around us. All we hear is literally, dude, that's fucking sick. Like, you'd be so good at it. It's going to take work. Have you thought about this? And they're building on your ideas rather than shutting it down at the first suggestion of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's imperative because, coming up with ideas again is related to self-esteem and confidence and all that. And, being vulnerable enough to kind of put those out there into the community and then, someone shutting it down,
Yeah.
like that's a scary thought. So when you have a community like ours, and exactly like you said, we try to find the holes, but our intention behind what we're doing is because we want the best, say for you.
Yeah.
So if you bring an idea and we go, hey, have you thought of X, Y, and Z? It's not because, we think the idea is shit or we think the idea is, you know, bloody, any kind of characteristic of the sun, but we want it to progress for you to either realize, hey, maybe not the best idea,
Yeah.
which will then lead into your education more,
Mm.
or it will turn into a great idea that we want you to pursue even more because it's going to help you learn even more. It's going to, make you some money, which would be great.
Yeah.
And it helps us all as a community. There's no point in shutting down an idea immediately because then you just ruin someone's confidence and you ruin their like creative kind of ability to come up with ideas. Because every time they associate coming up with ideas, they associate it with criticism,
Yeah.
right? So you need to be intentional in your way of like, okay, that's not a bad idea, but have you thought about X, Y, and Z, your competitive advantage? Have you thought about, every business principle under the sun? And I think a lot of people, again, like playing maybe the devil's avocado on that, is a lot of people come up with ideas, but they don't think about them deeply enough.
Yeah. Yeah. That
So they
makes
bring an idea, and then they're like, "That's shit." Like, have you actually? But instead of dealing with it in a way like that's shit, you need to kind of
provide some
intentionally
constructive.
give constructive criticism, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
this is not. I said you a few times there. That's not fair. Nor does it make sense. Like
Yeah.
I've come up with ideas. I'm like, this is the greatest business idea of all time. Like
Yeah.
done. We're gonna be billies. I said, I go and communicate it to someone, or like, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
You have no idea the amount of times I'm like, it's not like, oh my god, I suck. It's like far out. There's so much more to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's kind of how
Yeah, I think.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely yeah. You definitely don't want to, give the illusion that like it's easy and you can like just run with the idea completely, but at the
Yeah.
same time you don't want to shut things down. So it's kind of find that balance of, hey, that's a good idea, and getting them to think about, okay, what haven't they thought about, but not
Yeah.
necessarily shut down and choke the idea before it kind of grows. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One day that person who's creative enough to come up with that idea is going to have the education or the knowledge level to be able to come up with something that's just brilliant.
Yeah.
But
I'd
if you shut them
say
down immediately,
I'd say the reason why I think it's such a big thing though, to like, if you had to choose between like giving criticism and just encouraging people to run with an idea, I'd still lean towards encouraging the idea, because I feel like with a lot of young people, insecurities is a big thing. So like a lot of
yeah,
uh I think a lot of especially when you're kind of younger, like 18, 19, you're worried about what other people think a lot more than when you sort of, grow up and grow older, and you kind of realize that most people only really care about themselves than like your kind of ideas. They might kind of tease you about your ideas, but it's only the kind of like in that moment. It's not like an ongoing thing. So
mm.
yeah, I'd say like, I guess that's a good segue into like another, like one of my a piece of advice for my younger self would be, for a 20 something year old, take more risk, right? Like literally, if you think about someone who's like 20, you've got from the age of 20 until, say, like for males it's like 75 or 80, or females at 85, 90. You've got 70 years to make decisions, right? Where would you take the biggest risk? Would it be in your 20s, your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or 80s, right? The 20s are literally the time where you literally can make the worst mistakes ever and bounce back from them, because you still have the next 50, 60 years to kind of work that out, right? So I think a piece of advice would be to be more creative in sense of like taking risk, and try to express yourself. I'd say that probably one big piece of advice would be express yourself creatively, whether that's through trying to do what we're doing now, like in terms of like podcasting, making like sort of content on Instagram or YouTube, creating content around a hobby, or just trying to express yourself. It might even be going to your like local speaking clubs where you can present and practice your speaking and that sort of thing as well, because it paves the way for communication, which then helps pave way for more being able to express yourself a bit more.
Absolutely, dude. That's beautiful. So like, can't really can't really unpack that any further. That's beautiful. God damn.
Yeah.
I think maybe like being that 20-year-old who's going to take risks, be intentional about limiting your macro responsibilities so that you can take those risks.
Yeah.
You don't want to set yourself up with the responsibilities of a 30 to 40-year-old at 20,
Yeah.
because then you kind of limit you limit your years to take those risks, which is really, 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 it's probably one of the biggest problems in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
People try and get to that stage of 30, 40 way too quick. So they do things that, mortgage, etc., that kind of, really tie them down.
Yeah.
Which don't allow them to take those risks. And I think maybe you might agree with this because you're a touch older, but experiment. Try different things.
Yeah, I literally have that as one of my things. So it's,
really?
It's number one on my advice to myself is
that's crazy.
Explore.
I think it builds upon that.
Explore more and experience more. Seek novelty, seek discomfort. That's my first tip.
But I think it builds upon that perfectly. I believe.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's a great segue to go straight into that a little deeper, but find, as Naval says, find what's play to you and work for others. You know what I mean?
Okay, so like a question for yourself. At 18, what sort of things do you feel like? I'm putting you a bit on the spot here, but what additional experiences or what kind of things do you feel like you could have maybe tasted or tried or experienced a bit more, like at the age of like 18, 19?
Yeah, I wish I... one of the big pivotal moments for myself was having perspective of kind of other people's situations visually. And I got that by going over to Bali and kind of, seeing the poverty in Gili T. Gili T is a small island. It's a couple of hours off the mainland, where, they've got no cars. They've only got horses to travel and bicycles. And, the middle of the island is literally a tip. That's where all the rubbish goes. And, there's, all the locals live around there in like, I don't know, 2x2 plywood huts with corrugated iron roofs. They drink water out of a well, which is like just, the amount of diseases in that water, I couldn't even tell you, I guarantee. So having the ability to see that perspective, I didn't get to see that until I was 2 years ago. So probably 22. So I didn't put a high priority on traveling.
Yeah.
So I wish I did a little bit more of kind of that, soul searching experience of traveling at that age. Not going crazy with it, because I see a lot of people, potentially going to Europe and spending ridiculous amounts of money on, traveling for 3 months or 6 months or whatever. Yeah. Doing it intelligently still, and actually having an intention going to find and seek out, some perspective shifts.
Yeah.
But I wish I did a little bit more of that. I wish I did it a little bit earlier. But there's also a case to make. Maybe I wasn't ready at that age to be able to actually understand that perspective shift. So maybe I did it perfectly at 22.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good one. Definitely. I'd even now I'd say like traveling as soon as you can. like feasibly, without setting yourself up into, major debt, right? It's kind of finding a balance, but having intentional money set aside for traveling, with plans to have intentional traveling plans, right? So if you're being part of somebody else's travel plan, someone else's itinerary, you might find yourself down at the Gold Coast, every year spending $2,000 on the same things, or equally,
Yeah.
you might go overseas and go to Europe, or go to Asia and find the Australian bars and drink the Australian beers and like
Yeah.
literally experience Australia overseas. It's like, why are you doing it? So I think
Yeah. Makes no sense.
having a goal from your traveling, like trying to find perspective, trying to experience new cultures, and sort of embracing the culture, and like experiencing without judgment the places you're visiting.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I would love to hear a little bit more about your traveling experiences.
Yeah.
Maybe share like the craziest perspective trip you've had.
Yeah, for sure. So I think my first trip wasn't until I was, I think, 21. First
But you
trip.
did a fair bit, right?
Yeah, I did a lot of Southeast Asia, but I haven't sort of, outside of Japan. I haven't traveled anywhere else. So it's mostly been Asia. So one of the
Mm.
common themes was definitely, like, in the beginning, it was kind of like that novelty of like, hey, this place is completely different to Melbourne, to the Western world. You've got, um, number one, your dollar goes a lot further. So like being able to experience a different energy in a different city, population is way more dense. Being able to buy like coffees and drinks for like, 30 cents, and being able to buy meals for like $2 or $3. It was just, you're living like a king. And that's
Mm.
what the focus is when you're young, right? But then you also see the other side. It quickly gives you a contrast, whether you want to see it or not. You see poor people hustling, and you see people living their lives, and you see them going through what's normal for them, while you're making these choices of like, I can have two meals just because the meals only cost $3.
Yeah.
I can have three meals. So like you quickly find that,
I fear some people don't though.
yeah,
Sorry to
some
cut you
people
off. I
don't
feel
say
I
that.
feel some
Yeah.
people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Like,
Or,
you
mm,
know, we build a character in a way where, we would notice the fact that if we can spend this amount of money and get this, like, such little money and get crazy returns, that it's amazing for us, but there's a downside to it, and that's because these people are struggling.
yeah. I
I
think,
think people just
yeah.
think of
Oh,
themselves as kings.
yeah. There's also, there's also like a little bit of patience and forgiveness when you're kind of younger. I think, um,
Mm.
you need to kind of see things, process it, and then grow as a human being to kind of appreciate what's actually happening, both intellectually to process what's happening, and then emotionally think about how you're contributing to the problem. So like, it's not something that people would immediately experience on, say, like the first time they're sort of seeing poverty. It's kind of like when you see a problem for the first time, sometimes you can identify the problem, but you don't immediately have like a solution, or like, sort of an emotional sort of understanding of the situation.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point. It's really fair.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome.
but then there's also the other side of it, where you've seen enough of it, you know that it's bad, you know how you can fix it, but you choose not to do anything about it as well.
Mm.
So
Yeah. That's that's questionable morals, right?
yeah, it's a difficult topic though. It's kind of like, how, and I think we've discussed it a little bit, and even, as I get older, it's still something that I need to give more thought around. Is how do you give without feeling like you need to know where it's kind of going. So like, let's say if you see someone homeless on the side of the road, or you see someone who's less than, like, how do you decide how much to give, when to give, and how often to give, right? And who to give to.
Mm.
It's kind of trying to like what was the point that Dylan made around the ROI, like effective
Yeah, well, I
altruism?
think
Yeah.
yeah, effective altruism is what you're touching on there. It's kind of the example to highlight what it kind of means is it more beneficial to donate $40,000, which is the cost of a seeing eye dog in a first world country, or is it more beneficial to use that same dollar figure and put it into a third world country, and you can cure thousands and thousands of people of blindness.
Mm.
So it's kind of some to me. I think the example there is really really easy to kind of, I mean, maybe understand which way we kind of shift.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first world person has, is blind and, needs assistance, absolutely. But if we can cure thousands and thousands of people of blindness just by a pill or extra nutrients, the ideas that can come from those people now, the potential ROI of the world from, their kind of contributions is significantly better and higher.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And I mean,
I think like
you can
adding.
see a lot more people.
Yeah, I think like adding to that, for anyone who's kind of listening and like as you're kind of hearing us talk about the topic of giving and altruism, I think the first step, if you don't have the financial means to give, is to first just take enough curiosity, have the curiosity and have enough care to learn more about the problem, and actually say, like with the homeless person, you might actually start a conversation. You're not going to necessarily give them money, but you kind of understand what the problem is. You'll go overseas and you'll actually try to understand where the complexity of the problems, the perspectives, what considerations you haven't made, and that will at least get you down the path of acknowledging the problem, rather than like, hey, I'm just gonna have my holiday and pretend like there's no poverty over there and just enjoy my food and like carry on and have all my experiences and ignore the bad sides and just focus on the stuff that benefits me as the traveler.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we could go deep as hell. And one other thing, I guess, is like, you know who Sam Alameda is, or Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
Have you heard him speak about it before?
Um, I I think yeah, I think I did actually. So was that how he's got the thinking of giving as soon as possible as you can, but then also having like the bigger picture of like
Yeah,
trying to make
it's
enough
not like
money
what.
to return. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's, I think for people who are not as efficient as him as making money,
Yeah.
like the curiosity is like that first step.
Yeah.
Creating curiosity and understanding the problem, and then doing small things like maybe world vision. Um, you know, uh, you know, you can provide education and safety to a kid for $50 a month on there. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So it's those kind of small acts that create a habit for you eventually. And one of our goals as a company is Hardcore Headstart is to donate $1 billion, and individually we probably have our own as well. It's kind of like that habit building of, okay, one day when I actually do create large amounts of capital for myself, I will give back. Because a good point for people is, how do you know that once you actually do have the money, you will donate and allocate it in the best places? So for me, I want to make sure that I'm kind of already living up to those standards that I set for myself. I can't do the same as people who have ridiculous amounts of money yet, but I want to make it a part of me. I want to pay, that donating part of me. I want to make sure it's already a thing by the time I have decent amount, like large amount of capital.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
That's kind of like a little operational point.
Yeah, I think you have to take the ego out of it too. So like, it doesn't have to be completely like, it doesn't have to make you feel good about it. You can treat it like business, right? So you would invest in the best business partners to grow your business. So in the same way you're giving, you might use your due diligence, try to find the best within your knowledge, within your network, and choose the organizations that you think are going to make the biggest impact, and then trust that they're going to do that. Give your money and you focus on what you're good at, and let them focus on what they're good at, right? So that could be like
that's exactly
an approach
right.
of giving as well. Yeah.
It's really, it's a really, really hard thing, because I think a while ago we obviously, people in Bali are struggling right now due to Corona, and we have a lot of friends in Bali, and one of our friends, we ran a little GoFundMe for him.
Yeah.
And we raised nothing crazy, a small amount of capital, but obviously the power of dollar over there in Bali is considerably more impactful. So it helped him out for a while, which felt good. But if you go into the GoFundMe page, dude, there's stories on there that are heartbreaking. Like, it would cost the amount of money to actually help out or donate to, a small amount to every single one of those causes is millions upon millions.
It'll add up real quick. Yeah.
It's just so many people struggling, and so many people in pain, so many people hurting. It is a hard conversation, a hard reality to come to, that there is always someone struggling and hurting more.
Yeah.
But doesn't have the opportunity to fix it. So, there's people in these like Mozambique and like these really poor African countries, are some of the poorest in the world, that they don't have they might not have access to internet, they might not have access to education, they don't have an opportunity to even raise themselves some money or try and get out of the situation they're in.
Yeah.
So I find it kind of our job, and a standard that we have to hold ourselves to. It's our kind of duty to help those people who don't even have the opportunity to help themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of I think that's a really point, like a really impactful point of effective altruism.
Yeah.
As well as allocating it correctly.
Yeah.
I think I've got something. It's a little bit kind of different.
Yeah.
But we were both say involved in the whole Bitcoin and cryptocurrency world. We still are.
Yeah.
We've obviously gone through journeys in 2017 and all the rest of them, and maybe you had a few crashes previous. Because what year did you start?
Mid 2016. So yeah.
Similar. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, similar. Yeah, similar. So I think I wanted to talk about like time-based opportunities.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're lucky enough to be, in this internet age, you have an opportunity to, kind of maximize, your potential through that. But you also, if you have the awareness to spot opportunities like Bitcoin, that was arguably still is a time-based opportunity, especially back in 2016 and 17. That's when we started grinding to make sure we got the capital and try and invest it into, that asset as much as we could to give ourselves a head start when it comes to the financial side of things.
Yeah.
I guess the question is you obviously recognized on your own a time-based opportunity in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I guess, how did you see that, and why did you think, not necessarily why was Bitcoin so important, but why did you allocate so much time to that kind of opportunity, and why did you take it so serious? Because I feel a lot of people see opportunities and they go, oh, it's not for me. I won't do that one, or that's not something that I need to kind of address. But a lot of the times it's kind of that different kind of thought pattern of like, well, maybe I can address this. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can have a look at this. And, it can, if you take those time-based opportunities seriously, it can give you a head start in whatever, field they're in, especially monetarily.
Yeah. So my message there, or piece of advice to someone young on that topic, would be around actually take the time to look into opportunities as they present themselves to you, particularly if they're in your circle of competence, right? So if you're really interested, like we were interested in technology, right, and finances, and how this could potentially disrupt the way things are going, then it's almost your responsibility to invest your time to understand the opportunities that come from investing in that particular thing, both financially and the actual implications socially, and the implications of what if it becomes widely adopted, or like, does it have the potential to change the way, consumers and people and like society operates, right? So the way I sort of approached it in 2016, because like, there was a big element of like, hey, this is just a hot tip, this is a bit of a gamble, this is a bit of a like an opportunity, but like it still wasn't clear what exactly it is, right? So it's first figuring out where you're getting the opportunity from. So is it from a reliable source? If it is a reliable source and you trust that person enough and they've got a track record of providing you good advice, then invest a small amount, enough, invest an amount that is large enough that your you're committed to finding and learning out what that opportunity is. So big thing for Bitcoin is funny, like if you have no money invested in it, you start to ignore and filter out the information, even when it comes up time and time again. You have $1,000 in there, even though like, or $500, whatever it is, small amount. Suddenly you actually care. Your mind has gone, wait, you've put money into this. It's stupid of you to ignore it if you don't invest. So like your psychology changes as you've got your feet in the door. And then I think like for me personally, that amount was probably the equivalent of like maybe like 10% of what I had at the time, which I was eager to spend, because I'd saved up money, and I sort of learnt that I didn't want to hold just cash and savings. I wanted to invest it, and I saw the potential in it, and I thought this was a good area to potentially put a small amount of money and learn about it. Probably put a bit more than I should have, because it was literally, I remember my friend came to me, and it wasn't Bitcoin specifically, it was another coin called Waves. And my friend my friend basically just said, hey, look, I'm pretty certain this thing is going to double in the next like 3 to 4 months, 6 months max. I think you should put as much as you can on it. And I was like, I'll put a little bit, but I don't know. And I ended up putting like enough in there that I was just like, fuck, I'm gonna lose a bunch of money here. but that was enough for me to go, wait, I've put a lot of money into this, I should probably find out what it's about. So like most people spend too much time, especially when you're younger, spend too much time learning about the opportunity before they put any money in. My advice would be to put a small enough amount of money that it's more than like going out to a restaurant, but it's enough for you to go, hey, I need to know more about this. Is
that I sort of making sense? The principle there is skin in the game, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's probably
you have to have skin in the game. Simple. If you don't have skin in the game, like Mark is saying, that's just, if you need to know more about skin in the game, look it up, because it's incredibly important. But yeah, Mark just did a really good way of breaking that down there. Skin in the game is, it gives you that kind of sense of, oh shit, I need to be aware of what's going on here.
and having that sort of learner mindset, that kind of like, hey, I'm gonna put money where my mouth is. It forces you to start looking for more of those opportunities. Whereas if you're kind of someone that's like, like you hear it from your friends all the time that they haven't gotten into investing, they're like, I knew I should have got into AMD. I knew I should have got into Nvidia. I knew I should have got into Apple. Yeah. And you're like, what do you mean? You can still get into it now. Like,
yeah, I know.
And they'll say the same thing about the next big thing and the big thing after that.
I see so many posts like, oh, if I bought Bitcoin at like $100, I bought $1,000 worth, $100 would be worth this much amount of money. Yeah. And then the bottom line is, yeah, but you didn't.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're going to talk shit, like, you need to have skin in the game to be able to actually have an opinion on anything.
Yeah.
Especially, when it comes to investing, like allocating capital is the way we tell our story.
Yeah.
So by not allocating it, you're essentially saying, well, I don't actually believe in it.
Yeah.
If you go, oh, I believe in Bitcoin, and then you allocate capital to it, you got skin in the game, which means the story you're telling is the same as your actions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think what you're touching on there kind of actually leads to, we've been leading into each other one thing
It's
so
good. It's
perfectly,
good.
crazy.
Yeah.
But one I had was, be inquisitive and be curious at all times.
Yeah. That's a big
So
one.
yeah, when you're young, you can potentially, someone can give you a compliment and you're good at this specific skill, and you'll just pigeonhole yourself to that. Be
Mm.
curious and be inquisitive about everything, and fall in love with learning.
Yeah.
Your opportunities, like opportunities open, the doors open, when you know little things about anything, and you can impress by being inquisitive and by understanding a little bit about everything, and that's, like I said previously, that's one of the things that drew me to Dylan, is he knew a little about everything because he's wildly inquisitive.
Mm.
Don't lose, when you're a kid, everyone's like that. Everyone wants to find a little about everything, wants to get hands in every single little cookie jar, wants to understand exactly what's going on with every little nook and cranny. Don't lose that as you grow up.
Yeah. I think
It's,
that's
it's not a bad thing. It's a really good thing.
yeah. Yeah. I think a child doesn't have like scars, and they don't have like kind of people telling them, hey, that's a waste of time, and
Yeah.
you shouldn't. Yeah. And I think like kids have that curiosity, and like as they sort of they age, like you become adults, and you start shutting down that creativity, you start shutting down that curiosity because you think it doesn't serve you, but it's quite the opposite. um,
Absolutely.
gives you opportunities for sure.
Do you
Yeah.
think about, like, as a development kind of, or like a growth kind of metric, like kids grow
Hmm.
not just physically, mentally, the amount they consume between the ages of, I don't know, 1 and 18. They consume ridiculous amounts of information and they take everything in. Maybe it's not 18, maybe it's like 12, 13, something like that.
Yeah.
The amount they know and the amount they learn just through curiosity and inquisitiveness
Hmm.
in such a short amount of time. It's like, how do we get to 16, 17, 18, 19, maybe even 20 if you're lucky? Maybe even if it's after school.
Yeah.
You finish school, you stop learning, and you don't develop past that. How many 50-year-olds, this is not, this is true. How many
It's not.
50-year-olds they know that just have not learned a single thing after, other than, the specific field that they work in?
Yeah.
Like, they don't know any other skills. Like, it's heartbreaking because that inquisitiveness and that curiosity will lead to, all the things that we preach of, financial freedom, of happiness, of peace, of everything. Like, it's
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a generalization, but it's definitely true. Like it's just
yeah,
as you get older, you get your understanding or like the way you define things becomes more rigid. So you
mm,
become kind of this is the way things are, and you become less open to things generally. So it's kind of like a muscle. You need to keep working it out, right?
yeah,
Um, and I think like your advice to younger people, or your message generally is to be more curious, to be more inquisitive, and to be more creative. And I think that speaks to mindset, speaks to kind of like the macro. If we were to go a bit more granular and more like like more tactical, like sort of like actionable points, what are some things you think you could tell someone younger that they could do tomorrow to sort of be more curious?
I think one thing I learned, I think it was Naval, is when it comes to reading, read what you love first and then fall in love with reading.
I love that.
I think it's something along the lines of that quote, right? So
Yeah.
everyone has a passion that they're interested about. Like, you'd be hard pressed to find someone that doesn't. What you're passionate about, read more about it. more curious about it, try and understand every little detail about it, and then you fall in love with actually learning about something, and then you move on to different things that interest you, and so on. Like the one of the most important things I was ever taught is read a book a week or read as much as you can. And it doesn't have to just come from reading. You can watch videos. We have YouTube now. We're incredibly lucky where there's articles on the internet. You can get book summaries, on YouTube. You can, download Audible. It can, play the audiobook back to you, which is what I do. But even if you're scrolling on Facebook sometimes, scroll on Facebook, you see something that interests you, don't just read the headline and go past it. Try and find out as much information as you can about it, or at least be able to hold yourself in a conversation about it. So if someone asks you, hey, what do you know about any random topic, you may actually know something about it because you saw a headline one day and you read an article. Now, don't come off as I'm an expert about this, because you're quite obviously not. Because mastery takes 10,000 hours, and unless you spend 10,000 hours on something, you're quite simply not a master. But your your inquisitive nature, can come across as just that kind of person who is curious about everything. Wants to learn more. It's more of a brainstorming session when you know a little bit about something. It's more of a conversation similar to what we're having now. Like, I'm not teaching you anything, and you're like, I'm probably not teaching you anything, and you're teaching me some things. So it's like, it's not about sometimes like saying everything you know. Sometimes it's just about conversation and being curious. And you have the personality that we've already spoken about, where you turn into a journalist immediately, and that's a credit to you, because you're at your ripe old age of 30.
30, yeah. Right.
Just hurt your feelings. At the ripe old age of 30, you're incredibly inquisitive and you're incredibly curious.
I think you touched on a really important and key thing right at the start, around starting with what you're already gravitating towards. So if your thing is cars, or your thing is finances, or your thing is photography, whatever your hobby or interest is, start with the knowledge look at information, and then try to figure out what questions do you still have after you've read that or digested that piece of information, and be clear on the question that you have, so then you can find the next piece of content or the next thing that answers the question. And then that's going to create a bit of a cycle. I've learned this thing, what question do I have from that? You find the next piece of article that answers that question, and you're going around, and suddenly you're like going down the YouTube algorithm. You're going real down the rabbit hole.
Down the goddamn rabbit hole. Yeah. I think
interesting topic.
Where it applies to kind of like our investing background and financial kind of literacy background is sometimes it's hard to like kind of match the dots of why that would be necessary, but being curious and inquisitive and learning what you love first, and then loving learning. What the goal of, I mean, everyone has a different goal in life, but one macro goal that we can all agree on is happiness. And the things that you like doing create happiness for yourself. So where it kind of ties in is you want to be able to create more time for yourself so you can do more of those things.
Yeah.